Alright, hello everyone. Welcome back to AusNZ 4 Key Mania Tournament 2025. I'm Mipha right here, and then it's going to be a match for gemuses versus laimo231. And although this now maybe the warm up that these players have to do for a while, this might have a little bit of a showing in terms of a maybe physicality for a little bit, because this definitely would be a test of whether or not they are capable to do most of the stuff in the I guess in the week 2 map pool. Although this is way beyond what is the week 2 map pool is going to be like difficulty level. It should be I don't know, maybe just kind of a little bit of a showcase on what's going on later. I guess when they have to face each other later, or even to know their capabilities as a player for the later map pool. We can see a couple struggles here and there in between, especially from Label. He's not doing that for himself from an at 96.3, but on the other hand, you have your opponent as well from at 99. Even on a 1.1 rate, this is actually pretty dense for what it is. We're still like last. I guess still a last third remaining, which might be a little bit of a stamina degradation over time, but we shouldn't matter too much. Like are almost approaching the end with a 99.6 gems and Lamo trying to hold that 95 throughout as the warm up already progressing in. Yeah, getting to the bands. I guess the protection bands soon. So hopefully this should be a good test. So whether or not they are very well prepared for this map pool. We'll see who wins the rolls here. We should be getting. Oh, that's not a good roll for Gemus. They're rolling an 8, and Lamo is gonna take the win from the rolls here. So Lamo will be protecting first, and Gemus will be protecting second. So essentially, what Gemus will ban is gonna be the first one. But we'll see what they're decide to go for the strategy. I would think that Lamo should be try for the anti-medicine health. I'm not quite sure what to expect out of the protect. I can't really think about being the all-rounder that comes into play for Jameson here, knowing that being given the the higher tier or something along those lines. Oh, things like actually, this is kind of an interesting because I think the protect being as a Rice 3 and Rice 1, so I would assume that they are very well prepared for Rice. And it was just now really banning her brain along those one hit. The Lamb's fans are pretty, I think, on the most of the lower side of the pool. Yeah, like Hybrid 1 would be their ban. So no. Good thing is that the SP is still up, so there's some potential to picking SP in this match. Let's see what laimo231 decides to pick now. I would assume that that's a bad pick, is it? So I don't think you can pick LN1. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be picked by anyone because they're given the ban here. So we'll see. I think LN2 might be okay, but it's also the fact that it's kind of an LN10. Which might be not that favorable in terms of a strategy. Oh, actually going for Dispel Function, that's not too bad of a pick, I feel. Hybrid 2 is the pick for laimo. Yeah, this is kind of the more leaning into LN hybrid, in which I guess if you can consider Elixir as being the most prolific, one of the more prolific LN charters out there, but being kind of coveted into the hybrid territory, this should be, I guess, one of their strengths to do so. And I think laimo was probably trying to capitalize out of it. Alright, we should be getting to start soon-ish, knowing I think gemuses might be side reading, but I can't tell. Because from what we know so far, it's been they've been performing fairly well in the warm-up so far, even though it's a rice pick, but this is a hybrid, so you can't expect them to count them out. Not too bad on the intro, although it's kind of particularly tied right now. Although it's kind of start to slip away once we get to the harder patterning or the harder releases, I guess. Alright, we should be getting a little bit more intense on the LN release structure-wise. Although it's starting to slip away because the accuracy difference is a little bit on the high side for gemuses, and laimo is trying to keep up with that. Although with a 0.4% deficit is a little bit, it's still within reach if gemuses, what it takes is to have a couple misses. Or at least some major 200s counts that is going to happen at some point, but I'm not sure if it will happen just like even in a couple, like 10 seconds or so, given the patterning is a little bit on the edge of the LN release. Although it seems that 200 is more on laimo's side now, gradually dropping a little bit more. Now the deficit is coming along like a 0.5%, and it's now like a almost 10,000 point lead for gemuses. Still holding their own fairly well with their respective FCs, but unfortunately, that score difference is pretty much what it lies in, like 10,000, just around that area. A little bit more bursty this time around, just trying to tip the players off in the edge here, but now it's more than 10k lead. A little bit more pretty unintuitive releases in between the burst. Yeah, once the chart is coming to a close, and it seems like it's pretty much seals the deal for this first pick here. Unfortunate that Lemon wasn't able to keep up with the accuracy that Gemuses has, because it was really a valiant fight in the end, but unfortunately, it's a little bit too big of a gap right now for a 13,000 point lead to have on their favor. It's going to be their first point for Gemuses right here. Fairly good score actually. 994k on this pick is pretty impressive, especially for this kind of a Ellen release-ish hybrid pick. I was giving it a good try here as well, like 14,200s as well. Not an easy map to deal with either. It was seeing to see what the Genesis pick here, and it's going to be, I think, their yeah, this is their protect. So I should say that this would be a good time to capitalize off your own protect. And this is a little bit more on a, I guess, speedier-ish Rice pick. And a fast pick, not relatively fast in terms of other tournament status per se, but this is definitely on the faster side of the pool. All right, we'll see what this pick entails in. Especially for Genesis, this is more on the physical route, in a sense that it could throw you off if you don't have the, I guess, the patterning got down, or in terms of speed, which physicality might be an issue if you're a little bit on the lower seed. But hopefully this should be a good indication. If you're very good at this, then you might as well just take more than what you can think of. Yeah, I would say this is around like 260 BPM stream, which not continuous to the point that you can really struggle in the stamina side of things, but it can definitely serve as a little bit of a softer spot in terms of what comes next in terms of patterning. Although so far the difference is not too bad, or at least in comparison to the first hybrid that we saw. Although Lim was picking up a couple 200s because of late hits, I feel like. So it's now just under about 0.25% difference. 25% difference, I would say. You're still like in the halfway mark, which the difference is not too bad. It's just the score by Genesis right here is actually pretty ridiculous as well. 99.95. Pattern stays the same throughout. It should be that much of a, at least in terms of difficulty, it stays relatively the same. So there's no other hiccups unless you're slipped or something along those lines. You have to pick up a random 200 somewhere. But it doesn't seem to be happening for Jameson, I feel like. And even though the score is kind of closing in a little bit, actually Laimo picking up a miss somewhere on the stream here. And with that, the lead is just gonna skyrocket it into Jameson's favor right now. This is very clear in Jameson's favor right now, so this is going to be a 2-0 lead for Jameson's really good score actually at a 99.94%. Almost 98k even. That's a V1 double less with an 85 300. That is actually very impressive on this side. It's still even with the miss, even without the miss from Laimo, I don't think Yeah, it's just pretty clear cut. That is very much in what Gemus' strength in mind. Even with the ratio, it's still pretty much on Gemus' by a long shot even. Kind of wonder what laimo is gonna go with. I think it probably has to be SV. Yeah, there you go. SV pick going to be good live here. Trying to at least if they practice hard enough to a point that you can get an FC or even a very high score, this should be a very good pick even. I mean, I'm kind of interested to see because I feel like Genesis. Oh yeah, I'm not sure if the information is kind of I should trust that even, but sight reading is not too. I mean, not too bad. I did like a sight read on this. It's not even that. It's not even that bad of a score. If we're just trying to know the rhythm in this is what kind of makes it difficult. Because there are some couple sections that are just you have to rely on your timing more, and I guess knowing the I guess the zero, I guess the negative space reading SV, which is kind of the point, and just pretty much just invisible trill. You can't know if Genesis practiced this because yeah, I think kind of guessed it, and Genesis really doesn't practice all that much. I feel like with already like 93%, and laimo is pretty much in the lead by a wide margin now. Kind of want to know the what Genesis do in the invisible trail just to get a gauge on how much accuracy you will lose after this point. Oh yeah, okay, that's a major blow to that accuracy, dropping like 3% on that whole invisible trill alone. Although laimo is actually kind of tanking quite a lot even in that trill, the same way as Genesis, but still hitting the trills relatively okay. Oh yeah, apparently laimo seems like losing the FC there after a couple patterns just before the break here, but at this point it's 80,000, almost 80,000 point lead. It's just nothing to really scoff at either. That's a very wide margin to say the least. Yeah, it doesn't know about the teleport. Yeah, you can't even try to guesswork what the rhythm is in mind. And this one is pretty tricky for this particular section because it can easily fool you to get into thinking that it's a continuous rhythm, but apparently not. I got fooled a couple times in this one section here, so I guess this is pretty much understandable. Yeah, but this is a very decent work so far for both of these players. laimo finally getting the first point on their own SV chart. This is a very good one. 2 misses even. That is still what you would expect that if they have such minimal practice, they should be a very good score for at least a couple tries. Even Jameis with a side read at 90%, which is also very good, but not quite enough to beat that in terms of the amount of time to practice this one. Yeah, although even though this is the first pick, the first point, which you still have to capitalize one more pick to be able to, you know, just to get it on deadlock right here. But this is a good momentum to build up from here. Although they have to pick wisely because there's only 2 LNs remaining, and everything else is just rice. Oh, seems like they're trying to pick this malfunction because I think he's already being picked by Laimo earlier. Yeah, okay, so it's going to be one of the jump stream. I guess jump stream pick is fairly fairly straightforward. It's just nothing else but just to get the consistency going. Not gonna bother pronouncing that because it would be embarrassing to botch it. But you know, it's a jump string pick running at 195, or at least somewhere along those lines with a couple of bursts in between. But it's not too bad overall. All right, we should be seeing what would actually, you know, what gemuses would actually do on this. Given that the Rice one pick was such a very high scoring one, like he got like 99.94, which is almost 998. Even though this is not particularly you know, a pick that is not necessarily meant to be, you should be aiming for very sharp shooting scores, but this is pretty much what it says on the tin. You just have to go with like much lower pace, but it's very consistent enough that you can get like pretty much like 99.95 plus. Yeah, okay, yeah, so Laimo's still doing very strong right away, like almost 99.9. The gemuses accuracy is still climbing back up to 99.99, still barely hanging on over there. Though I guess the pattern does feel a little bit more continuous, even though it's still on the same pace as like in the 195 BPM that we just saw earlier on the intro. Or I guess it seems to be taking a little bit more a denser route after the jump trill, and it should be once we get that after the break, we should be getting to see what that kind of score we're getting into like 99.97 territory. If you can manage to pick back up to 999k, it's going to be insane. Still a little bit more to go, and even score difference is still relatively small, but I think up until the end, oh, there's the miss on the mini jack right there, alarm Laimo there. Very unfortunate place to miss there, but but it really seals the deal with Gemus's third point here. It's now 3-1, and look at that score! My goodness, 38-300s with basically probably the one of those players that you actually want to watch out for in terms of ratio or anything, because otherwise it would be it's still a very good score otherwise. It seems like a little bit of a tough situation for Laimo right now. Yeah, I think given that one miss, it still it still wouldn't be enough to catch it up to in terms of ratio difference. But they still have two LN picks to make work with. Either Assault Taxi or Conflict. It would be one of those choices here. But yeah, but it's going to be Conflict, which I think it's a fairly decent pick, not going for full on LN density. We'll see what this goes, because I guess in terms of difficulty, it's around the same as Assault Taxi, or I guess in the personally speaking, in terms of difficulty level. Although it has its fair share of the tricky sections, although rather than just straight up density. We'll see what this actually plays out for Laimo here. Yeah, the three column melon patterning would be kind of what suits here. Still fairly hanging on into their respective FCs, although with gemuses, you would think that he has much higher accuracy in terms of everything else. This is still a fairly anybody's game, really. They still have to keep on hanging on with the couple mini jacks in terms of these LN patterns here. Yeah, this is still at like around the middle point of the chart here, and it's not really budging in terms of accuracy difference right now. It's almost under about 0.50% in terms of accuracy. Though, although it's not the worst thing in the world, especially if you're trying to FC, which I think the sole purpose is to be that, and maybe not missing somewhere in between. Yeah, we'll see once to get to the little bit of a deceptively harder to anchor the patterns forward here. Barely managing to hang on after that little bit of mini jack section, and it should be fairly relatively the same pattern throughout. Although this is a little bit more difficult in terms of structure because it's kind of more two-hand shrilly almost. But it seems like it's not going to be budge at all, as Jameis is still hanging on at like around 99.8, just a little bit under. But Laimo is also hanging on with their FC, but it's definitely not nearly enough to tank all around like a 992k from Jameis right here. Very good FCs for both of these players, really. But it really is just a ratio difference is what really carries them through for Jameis right here. It's going to be match point here for Jameis is 4-1. Though it's not over yet, so we still have one more pick. So we got actually picking the rest of the LN picks now. Fairly interesting approach to actually not picking the next rice pick, but apparently not. You got Assault Taxi coming in. Alright, this is a full-blown LN density, which you would expect that to be the case for... I guess in particular of this match, this would be what you would call... You have to go into the physical route of LNs. Although it's not terrible in terms of what a difficulty entails, but it's really just you have to hang on for kind of the consistent barrage of LNs being thrown at you. Either semi-inverse or something along those streams. It's kind of the main point of the chart here. Starting off very strong start for gemuses right here. Even at around 99.87 on the intro. Laimo was barely hanging on to the 99s, but it's really just that that accuracy difference alone is quite a wide margin to deal with here. And more patterns coming up, even with the small 1/6 burst in between of that. doesn't seem to be particularly phased for both. Oh, Jameis is that's quite a dirty miss even to account for that. Maybe the margin's starting to shorten up a little bit here, I feel. Needs one more mistake for coming out of Jameis, but apparently Laimo's still barely hanging on at that 99s, but it's still not quite increasing that, or at least closing up the gap here. It's now back at the 400 combo bonus for Gemuses, so it's at least it's still around like 8,000 point lead, but they don't want to bottle it even at this late. They were picking up 200s left and right here, which is not helping their cause because it is still around like 99% throughout the entire chart. And James is picking up very nicely in terms of after having a miss somewhere in between of the inverse. Yeah, even with the miss, I feel like this is pretty much one final nail in the coffin for this match, and it seems like they're going to be James is taking the win 5-1 against Laimo here. Congratulations for them, and especially after 4 misses in consecutive row, that is what actually kind of hurts them to score here. But 1-200 for this pick is very impressive, knowing that as an Ellen pick, releasing is already a tough challenge to deal with, even with Laimo with also very good FC on their own. But yeah, congratulations to Genesis there for picking up a strong fight towards the end, although not being able to capitalize on the SV pick in particular, which would not be a sweep, which is a very good thing for Laimo there, picking up a point on the SV pick where they are not banned at all. So it should be a good practice reminder for them to actually practice SV if you're not if you don't want to ban it, but that would be a discussion for another day up until we get to the next match for Genesis later on. But we still have quite a bit of a schedule to work with for today, and I feel like for now at least, we should be seeing the next. I guess the next match is I would say it's probably coming out like around 6 CTC or something along those lines. It's going to be Game Turn Games versus Willow, and I think it would be a good ample time to have a little bit of rest until we get to that match in particular, because there are quite a couple banger matches coming up for you after that match. So stay tuned for those next matches, and maybe that's all I have to get to for this hour. So stay tuned for the next match. We'll be right back.